Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we're diving straight into an incredibly fascinating and honestly super tense period of history. Last time, we talked about how the newborn Islamic state in Medina was built on the world's first written constitution. It looked like this perfect utopian welfare state, filled with peace and brotherhood. But today, we're looking at the intense, multi-front challenges this young state actually faced and the brilliant strategies used to just survive. Honestly, think of early Medina less like a tranquil oasis and way more like a pressure cooker of threats.
And today, we're unpacking this history using that exact pressure cooker model, looking at how threats layered from the inside out. We'll be covering the illusion of peace, internal sabotage, the treaty breakers, the external squeeze, masterful prophetic wisdom, and finally, the breaking point. So part 1, the illusion of peace in this newborn state. We established that the Constitution of Medina and the Pact of Brotherhood wove these tribes together into a seemingly peaceful society. But you really have to ask yourself, was this newborn state actually safe? I mean, when the sun of truth rises, do the forces of falsehood just pack up and surrender? Or does that illusion of peace just mask some seriously dark brewing conspiracies? Well, history tells us this new state was anything but safe. Beneath the surface, dangerous elements were already raising their heads. That brings us to part 2. Internal sabotage and the hypocrites. Let's start with our first layer of tension, right inside the city walls. And you've got to look at this sheer contrast in expectations. The most dangerous internal threat was the Munafiqeen, or the hypocrites, led by a guy named Abdullah ibn Ubayd. Get this, before the Prophet's migration, preparations were literally already in place to crown Abdullah ibn Ubayd as the undisputed king of Medina. But his reality completely shifted overnight. When the Prophet arrived and the people enthusiastically embraced Islam, his dream of absolute power was totally shattered. So, forced by circumstances, he outwardly accepted Islam, but secretly, his heart was just filled with intense malice and jealousy. It's a pretty stark reminder of how incredibly dangerous a bruised ego can be to a community, right? He immediately started holding secret meetings to sow division and just hollow out the Islamic society from the inside. The Quran actually perfectly profiles this psychological duality. Verses 8 through 10 of Surah al-Baqarah expose these exact tactics, saying, "And of the people are some who say, 'We believe in Allah and the last day,' but they are not believers. They seek to deceive Allah and those who believe, but they deceive not except themselves and perceive it not." The verses go on to explain that they literally have a disease in their hearts, and because of their lies, they face a painful punishment. It's a profoundly sobering breakdown of their internal state. So the big question is, how do you even identify an invisible enemy like that? To make this historical threat recognizable, the Prophet Muhammad outlined 3 very clear signs of a hypocrite, grounding this insidious danger in practical, everyday behaviors we can all spot. Recorded in Sahih Bukhari, hadith number 33, he stated, "The signs of a hypocrite are 3. Whenever he speaks, he lies. Whenever he promises, he breaks it. And whenever he is trusted, he betrays that trust." It was essentially the perfect diagnostic tool for the early Muslims to spot the sabotage happening right under their noses. Moving on to part 3, the treaty breakers, or the neighborhood threat. So stepping one layer further out in our pressure cooker, we hit the Jewish tribes of Medina, specifically Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. Under the Constitution of Medina, the treaty was crystal clear: mutual defense against outsiders. Nobody was supposed to help external enemies, period. But as Islam grew and the Muslims' strength stabilized, the prejudice of these tribes completely woke up. Instead of honoring the charter, they openly rebelled. They shattered the treaty by colluding with both the polytheists of Mecca and those internal hypocrites we just talked about, all to dismantle this new state. Historical records even note that the Banu Qaynuqa openly challenged the Muslims right after the Battle of Badr. Total betrayal. The Quran highlights this massive betrayal in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 13. It says, "So for their breaking of the covenant, we cursed them and made their hearts hard. They distort words from their proper usages and have forgotten a portion of that of which they were reminded." This just shows how their broken covenants and distorted words earned them a hardened heart, ensuring the Prophet would continuously uncover their treachery. All right, part 4, the external squeeze from the Quraysh. Now we hit the outermost and honestly probably the most imposing layer of our pressure cooker. The Quraysh of Mecca didn't just sit around and wait. Their tactics were incredibly aggressive. They actively tried to strangle Medina, both financially and militarily. I mean, they initiated a severe economic blockade, put immense pressure on the surrounding tribes, closed off vital trade routes, essentially suffocating the city's commerce, and even started threatening attacks on the very outskirts of Medina itself. For the Muslims, just sitting idle with folded hands was absolutely no longer an option. And it was exactly in this incredibly volatile, suffocating environment that divine permission was finally granted to the Muslims to take up arms. Surah al-Hajj verses 39 and 40 declare, "Permission to fight is given to those against whom war is made, because they have been wronged, and indeed Allah is competent to give them victory. They are those who have been evicted from their homes without right, only because they say, 'Our Lord is Allah.'" You see, this wasn't about aggression at all. This was fundamentally about their basic human right to exist and to defend their own lives and property.
Which leads us perfectly into part 5, masterful prophetic wisdom. So think about it. How do you defuse a bomb with 3 active timers, inside, next door, and outside? You need absolute strategic genius. Look at this incredible historical incident. Once, the leader of the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubayd, used these incredibly vile, insulting words, basically claiming that upon returning to Medina, the honorable would expel the humiliated. Hearing this, the brave companion Umar ibn al-Khattab was absolutely furious. He demanded immediate execution, saying, "Let me strike the neck of this hypocrite." But the prophet's wisdom prevailed. He calmly chose patience, telling him, "Leave him, lest people say that Muhammad kills his companions." He knew that violence would spark a devastating internal civil war and absolutely wreck their reputation. So he neutralized that massive internal threat with absolute forbearance. And externally, the prophet was just as calculated. When the Meccans blocked trade and attacked pastures, he didn't launch an immediate, highly emotional counterattack. Instead, he rolled out a measured, step-by-step defensive strategy. Step 1, ignore emotional reactions to provocations. Step 2, aggressively form defensive pacts with neighboring tribes to lock down the borders. And Step 3, dispatch small, highly organized defense patrols known as Saraya. This wasn't about starting a war out of nowhere. It was about projecting a very clear, undeniable message of strength to the enemy, proving that Medina was no longer weak and knew exactly how to defend itself. And finally, part 6, the breaking points. These remarkably wise maneuvers definitely kept the state alive, but the pressure in our cooker was reaching an absolute boiling point. All of this internal betrayal, the broken covenants by the Jewish tribes, and that relentless external squeezing by the Quraysh, it all perfectly set the stage for the ultimate clash between truth and falsehood. It forces us to ask, which battle changed the course of history forever? The pressure cooker is literally about to explode. To find out exactly how this nascent state faced its very first universe-altering clash, and to witness the breathtaking events of the epic Battle of Badr, you have got to subscribe to the animated Quranic Tales channel on YouTube right now. Join us for our next explosive explainer, where we cover the first great battle of Islamic history. Until then, ask yourself, when you are surrounded by threats on all sides, do you break under the pressure or do you forge a diamond? Stay curious and keep learning.